Today, we are joined by Connie Chandler, our presenting sponsor, Minuteman Press of Humble, and she is here to say a couple of words and to welcome everybody. Hi, Connie, how are you?
I'm doing much better. Every day gets a little bit better, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Well, I'm turning the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. Thank you. And thanks to everybody who's tuning in with us today. We're certainly proud to have you. It's an honor for Minuteman Press to be able to be a sponsor for anything the Chamber does. Those of you who know me know that I'm a big proponent of Chamber of Commerce, and we do what we can to help all the other small businesses around. We were affected just like all of you were with this terrible pandemic that came along, but we are getting back on our feet. We are back to normal hours again, 8:30 till 5, and we're almost back up to full staff thanks to the SBA. We were able to do that. It's a really pleasure to be here, but it's also a pleasure to serve all of you. Any of you that have anything that you need printed, it doesn't matter if it's a business card or a banner or anything in between, promotional products, we can do that for you. We've done probably 1,000 signs. We're back open, whatever it was that people needed, so we can do that for you. So just give us a call and come see us. We are actually going to unlock our doors, I think, today or tomorrow. It's been call and come in before that. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Connie, and we're excited that you're opening your doors soon. I know you're glad to be back. We've had many conversations
Yes.
throughout this, and thank you for your continued support of our organization and all that we do, and as your sponsorship for our seminars that we're doing, and now virtual seminars that we're doing. Thank you. And we'd also like to recognize we do have a silver sponsor, the Groves Ashlar Development, and wanted to give a shout out to them and thank them for also sponsoring. If you're just joining us, I'm going to go over the housekeeping notes again. All of our participants are going to be muted, but if you have a question, please type them in the Q&A, the chat function of our Zoom webinar. If you're joining live via Facebook, please write your questions in the comments, and Carol posted on staff here is going to be feeding those questions to us. And now I'm going to introduce our very esteemed guest that we have here with us today. And that's Tim Jeffcoat. He's the director of the U.S. Small Business Administration here in Houston. He oversees the SBA programs and services in Houston and the surrounding 32 counties of Texas. So that's a pretty big territory that he's over, and he is the resident expert for this area. Most of Tim's career has been in private sector leadership roles and in international business, marketing, and business development. His career has required international assignments and global responsibilities. He is a graduate of Auburn University with a master's of business administration degree, and he has a BS degree in marketing as well as music business. He was nominated for the SBA Ike Award in the category of most valuable player and has completed 4 iron distance triathlons and the Escape from the Alcatraz triathlon, and teaches graduate classes in economics, marketing, and other subjects in his spare time. That's some fun information that we got to know about you, Tim.
Yeah,
that's really neat. I wanted to personally thank Tim. I got to know him following Hurricane Harvey a little bit better, and was struck when we first met about your sincere compassion, your empathy for what everyone's going through. And since then, it's really been a pleasure to work alongside with you through these different disasters and different ways that we help business, because you certainly have that heart, and you can feel that every time that I talk to you. I can feel that you have a heart and a passion for what you're doing. You truly care, and you're probably one of the most responsive people I have ever emailed. You are very quick to be able to respond and to provide assistance, and I've always appreciated that about you. And this was your idea. This was your office's idea to have these Q&A sessions.
Absolutely.
As you've been doing the webinars, you guys have realized that there's probably people that have questions that haven't had time to. So this whole format today is about our business's questions, and you can answer those directly. So what a great idea. And we certainly appreciate you partnering with us. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kick off, and I'm going to toss a softball to get us started as I start reading the questions that are coming in. But is there still money available to apply for EIDL and PPP loans?
As of my last accounting, it's about $125 billion that is still available. And I encourage every business that has the slightest need for financial assistance to seriously consider it. Great.
Okay, so here's one of our first questions. Will the length of time be extended past 8 weeks to utilize the PPP loan? I'm assuming before the repayment period.
That's a really good question. So you probably have been watching the news. You probably heard that the House has put together a new set of legislation, and the House has passed it. But if we all remember high school civics, the House passes it and the Senate must agree. Then it goes to the president for signing. So that's all that's happened is the House has passed it. That's just Congress speak for some progress has been made. But it's not enough progress for, I think, anyone on this call to get excited. I know that they passed the bill. I believe they passed the bill a few days ago, and it's still in the Senate. That's not normally a good sign. If the Senate really encouraged and embraced that legislation, they would have signed it already. So I can't tell you that it won't get signed today. It might be that they're signing it right now. But if you have a PPP loan, I would encourage you to stay real focused on what's called the 8-week covered period. If you have one, you know what that is. Otherwise, any changes that might happen at this point, it's just sheer conjecture.
And as a follow-up to those questions, and the answer is going to be the same because part of that legislation was a possible simplification of the FTE calculation, as well as the percentage required to be used on payroll being decreased. I believe it was to 60%. And so those are still up in the air as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, as of today, what everyone should know is that if you have a PPP loan or if you're considering one, then from the time the money is dispersed to you, there's an 8-week period within which you will be able to earn up to 100% forgiveness. The way you do that is 75% or more of the money is spent on paychecks, 25% or less can be spent on rent, mortgage, interest, or utilities. Let me unpack that just a little bit.
Sure.
When it comes down to the actual process of the 75%, now it's a minimum of 75. It could be a maximum of 100. You could spend all of it on paychecks if you want, but it's going to be by employee. So if you've got 50 employees, when you do your forgiveness application, you will list all 50 employees and whether they're making 100% of what they used to make or less. So for every one of them, that 75% is being assessed. So also then on the 25%, maximum of 25%, if you spend that on rent, mortgage, interest, or utilities, you should know that in the most recent guidance, that's been opened up a little bit. Previously, when they said rent and mortgage interest, the implication, because it wasn't overt, was that that was real property. So that would be the rent on the building that you use. Now that's extended to personal property. So that should mean that if you have leases on vehicles for your business, or if you are purchasing machinery or heavy equipment, then that interest can be deducted. So that really expands how you can use that 25%, but it's still only 25%. And the third thing to know about forgiveness, you got the 75 and the 25, and then the third thing is that you will be looking at your full-time equivalent employee headcount. There's a reference period. There's actually 3 you can choose from. And you're going to look back at that period and say, okay, I had 10 FTEs in that period. And then during your 8-week covered period, you need to get back to that 10 FTE count. And you definitely want to get back by June 30th, which is only 27 days from now. If you are able to do that, then you will have 0 reduction in forgiveness because of FTEs. We call that the safe harbor, and that's a super important concept if you have a PPP loan. Make sure you achieve your FTE count by June 30, and that should put you in a very strong position to be able to get 100% forgiveness. I know you didn't ask all that, Jenna,
No,
but it was all
that's good.
related, so I wanted to pack it all into that one response.
Sure. We've got a question that's come in here. If the PPP funding date for this business was April 13th, will April, May, and June's rent and utilities be covered? So they paid the April rent on April the 1st before their funding date of the 13th.
Okay.
Can they count that amount made on April the 1st?
No, you're going to be able to count from the time the money is dispersed. And I'll come back to that because I want to talk about that. But from the time the money is dispersed to you, that's when it starts. And it's going to be the expenses that you both incur and pay in the 8-week period, with one exception. Let's take your rent as an example. It comes due on the 1st of the month, but you've just pointed out that your period starts on the 3rd. So that's 2 days of April that you couldn't use. So you're going to take your rent, you're going to divide it by the number of days in April, and then multiply it by the number of days that you actually have in the covered period. In this case, I think that would be 29. Then for May, your bill is actually going to show up June 1st, and it's only an 8-week period. So your June 1st is outside, I believe that's going to be outside of your covered period, but that's okay because you're being billed for things you incurred. So you can actually pay that June 1st and then it'll apply back.
Okay, great. And if you're joining us now, we're asking everyone here with us participating to please type your question into the chat. If you're here via Zoom, if you're joining us on Facebook Live, go ahead and write your question into the comments, and those will be fed by our chamber staff into our comments here so that we can make sure we get your question answered by Tim Jeffcoat. So the next question, I'm going to read through it, and it's similar. If your PPP loan proceeds are dispersed the same day that the pay period begins, based on the wording for the alternative period, that the alternative period can be selected to include the first pay period after the date of disbursement. Can the alternative period begin at the beginning of the next payroll date?
Yeah, so first, Connie, I see that comment, War Eagle, and I agree. Yeah, Janet, and for everybody, you have two choices on your 8-week period. So again, from the time the money is dispersed, that starts your 8-week period. And in that 8 weeks, you're going to earn up to 100% forgiveness. There is something called an alternative 8-week period or alternative covered period. If you have a biweekly or more frequent pay schedule, then what you can do is when the money is dispersed to you, you can choose the next payroll period and you can start it at that time. So to answer you, Janet, that's the way I read that. The way I read that, you could choose your next, as long as it's biweekly or sooner or quicker, you could choose your next pay period, and that would be the beginning of your 8-week period. So yes.
Great, we've got a couple more questions, and this one is referring to the EIDL loan, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. If they are approved, are they able to accept the forgivable advance but decline the loan?
The last couple of words you said got messed up, Jenna.
Okay, so let me try again. Are they able to accept the forgivable advance with the EIDL loan but decline the actual loan? And will that, okay.
Yes, you sure can. So the intent of Congress is that when you apply for that EIDL loan, you have the opportunity to also ask for what's called an advance. I don't know why we call it that, because it's actually a grant. So you apply for that, it's calculated as $1,000 per employee. So if you have 5 employees, when you applied, you would have been eligible for a $5,000 grant. They're going to send that straight to your checking account, and for some reason, they don't tell you when it happens. So that $5,000 is going to show up in the account you gave, and it's going to be from the Department of Treasury. And then I think it will also say EIDG on it for Economic Injury Disaster Grant. That is automatically a grant. There's no forgiveness. It's simply your grant. After that period, if they propose a loan to you or they offer a loan amount to you, you may decline, and there is no repercussion whatsoever on the grant.
Okay, great. Okay, if PPP, if you don't spend all of the 75% on payroll expenses, do you have to pay back the balance? And over how long? What are those terms?
Okay, you have basically two choices. So you get to the end of your 8-week covered period, and if you, let's say that you earned, you had a $100,000 loan, and you earned 75% forgiveness. That's going to leave you a balance of $25,000. You have two choices. You can decide you're going to keep that $25,000 and you want to be able to use it going forward. And that's pertinent for a lot of businesses right now because they just, for lots of reasons, they don't want to get back to full employment right now. Or they already made the decision to downsize last year and the loan is based on last year's payroll. So they wound up with more money than they could really use. So what you can do, you have two choices. You can either give that back and then you should be fair and square on the loan at that point in time. Now you need to check the note that you signed with your bank, but that note should have the verbiage that says any unused portion can be returned to the bank with no penalty. So that you should be able to do that, but check your note. Secondly, if you don't want to do that, you want to hang on to that $25,000 and have the opportunity to use it later for some paycheck work, then that will convert into a 2-year loan at 1% interest. And remember, with a PPP loan, this first 6 months, you don't make a payment. You've already gone through 2 months with the 8 weeks, so that should leave you now with 4 months, no payments. Now interest will be accruing, but it's only 1% interest. That's not going to be a huge amount of money. So those are your two choices in that case, Jenna.
Okay, great. And Brian, let us know if we answered that question for you, if you had a follow-up to that. Here's another question coming in. Is the SBA still doing regular capital loans right now?
As many as possible. Every year in Houston, there's almost about $1.1 billion that is loaned in the normal SBA guaranteed lending program. And that's with about 200 lenders here in the Houston district. You probably know who many of them are right offhand. Just so happens one of them's name is on this coffee cup I'm drinking out of. Please don't read that as a subliminal advertisement or endorsement. It's not. They just happen to give me this cup and it's the one that I used when I made coffee. But yes, that's absolutely happening. And my office, and we'll talk more about this as we go through this, Jenna, but my office is doing a lot of webinars right now, and we're going to do a lot more. We will probably be doing on average about 4 or 5 a day, maybe 6 or 7 a day by the end of this month. In fact, we're really doing that now, but the nature is going to change. And some of those are going to be focused on the existing SBA capital programs that always are here 365 days a year. We will be doing panels of lenders so that you can hear what they are doing now and how they're helping small businesses unrelated to PPP. You'll be able to learn from some of our in-house experts about these programs and how they can assist your businesses. I believe we did one yesterday at 1 o'clock. I don't think we're doing one today, but all those webinars are posted on our website, and I'll paste that information in the box at some point. I'd really encourage you to do 2 things in that respect. Go to my website, take a look at some of the webinars we're offering, but even more importantly, in the bottom right-hand corner of the website, there's a place you can sign up for our emails. We do use direct email. We are the United States government. We're not going to spam you or sell your name to people that want to sell you things. And every time we do anything of substance, we will be sending something to you so you're aware of it. So that was a long answer to a short question, but I wanted to cover some of those things too, Jenna.
Of course. And if you're joining us now or new to our webcast here, if you have questions for Tim Jeffcoat, who is the director of the Houston area for the SBA, please type those in the chat function of Zoom. If you're joining us via Facebook Live, please write your questions in the comments. And we've got our superstar Carol posted on staff that is feeding those questions to us through Zoom. So we're moving right along to the next question. In terms of declining the idle loan offer, do you physically need to reply? And I'm guessing that's do you need to reply via email or call somebody to decline, or how do you go about declining it properly?
Well, when you get, first let me just preface it with everything about the economic injury disaster loan has changed since Harvey. It's a completely different program these days than it used to be. So the way it will work now is you will be getting an email from the SBA, assuming you are approved. You'll get it's a very standard kind of email. It says, "Dear Tim, you've been approved for X dollars." And then there's like three little buttons, kind of like a stoplight. The first one is, "Yes, I'd like it." And they're going to send back a note. And the second one is, "Yes, I've signed the note," and you attach a copy. And then the third one is, "Congratulations, here's your money," basically. So at that point, you do have the ability to say, "No, I'm not interested. No, I don't want this loan." Also, and if you don't want it, then I would encourage you to do that immediately and get that closed. What will happen is when they send that email to you with that offer of an EIDL loan, that also kind of starts a clock. I don't think there's a formal decision on how long it is. It seems to be about 2 weeks. So if they sent it today on June the 3rd, then probably if you haven't responded by June the 6th or 7th, they're going to email again and say, "Hey, did you want this thing or not? Because if you don't, we're going to cancel it." And it feels like it's about 10 weeks to 14 days, where if you haven't replied, they're simply going to delete the offer as if it never existed. So if you do get an offer and you want it, I encourage you to take it as quickly as possible. If you don't want it, it would probably be helpful to all the other small businesses if you went ahead and declined, just to free up our capacity to help everybody else.
All right, we've got another question that's come in. If I entered 58 employees on the application, but we now only have 56 employees, one decided to resign, one left for maternity leave, as long as I have proof letters of this, will we still be deducted for that?
No. And let me explain. So first, it's not really the employees that you entered on the application when you applied for PPP. What you're actually being evaluated on are your full-time equivalent employees. So there's 2 reference periods, actually 3 if you have seasonal characteristics to your business, but you choose a reference period. The first reference period, I'm working from memory here, I could find it quickly, is, it's a 6-month period from last year, from 2019. So let's say you chose that. What you can do is calculate your FTEs in that period. Let's say it came out to be 58. And then you have one person who has quit for whatever reason, or you offered for one to come back after you laying them off at the same wages and they declined, or you have someone that voluntarily wanted to reduce their hours, or you fire one because for cause, they were stealing from you, or they attacked somebody in the workplace or something like that. All of those, as long as you document them, that reduces your FTE obligation. So if you did all 4 of those, you'd go from 58 to 57 to 56, and then eventually down to 55 and a half, let's say, because that last example was you had somebody that voluntarily wanted their hours reduced. So to answer your question, yes, as long as you document it.
Okay, great. Another note here, if you're joining us live on Facebook, please write your questions in the comments. We'll get those fed in here. And if you're joining us via Zoom, please write your questions in the group chat. Here's another one, and this is a little bit of a different question. Any resources for legal help in regards to business interruption claims?
I'd probably need to know more, but if you have, I'm assuming you have an insurance company, you had business interruption insurance, and now they aren't paying. And that's not uncommon that they aren't paying, because biological disasters are frequently not covered in business interruption insurance. At least that's what I'm told. I'm not an insurance person. I don't work in the business insurance industry, but I hear the same thing. If you think you have a legitimate claim, for sure, then you want some competent counsel to help you. First, you can contact the SCORE organization, and I'll paste their information in the chat box here in just a second. I nodded this way because it's in that monitor over there. I've got 3 of them going. You can contact SCORE. They do have attorneys that are volunteers. They are completely free to you. They won't represent you, and they're not going to do heavy lifting for you in terms of pursuing that claim. What they will do is they will give you the advice of how you might approach it, whether they think it's even likely to result in success. And then they may be able to refer you either to some of the legal aid organizations that exist in Texas, like Lone Star Legal Aid. They take pro bono cases. Or they may be able to refer you to an attorney that you would have to compensate, but that would be a good choice for you on pursuing this matter. So if that's what you're experiencing, if that's what your question was, I think that would be my main advice to you. And right now, if you want to look in the chat box, I am posting the contact information for Houston SCORE, which stands for, or at least used to stand for, Service Corps of Retired Executives. They have about 160 volunteers here in the Houston metro that volunteer their time to help small businesses with anything they need.
Right, and we do have a relationship with SCORE, just for everyone that is out there. So if you need to be connected with your SCORE representative here in the Lake Houston area, please call our office, and Carol or Mark, if you don't mind typing in our direct line here, or our office line here, email addresses, so that people can get that and contact us for our SCORE representative. We're happy to connect you with them. Okay, can you distinguish between the eligible healthcare cost for companies versus sole proprietors under the PPP program?
I think I can, and I'm going to look over on this monitor. So if I look like I'm looking across the room, I'm not. I saw that question, and I do have something to tell you on that. This is from the last guidance. It'll take me a second to find it. Won't take very long. Here we go. So I think what you're asking is addressed in item 3C of the last guidance document that came out. And what it says is no additional forgiveness is provided for retirement or health insurance contributions for general partners and Schedule C filers, as such expenses are paid out of their net self-employment income. Whether you like that answer or not, that's the answer. And that's a nice segue, Jenna, for everybody on this webinar now. Do know that my office does detailed forgiveness webinars. We go through the application process and we try to do a summary. It's a bit boring. I have to confess, it's like reading you something from the IRS, how to do your tax return.
Right.
But we do cover what you really need to know. And that's an example of some of the things we cover in that webinar. And there's one today at 1 o'clock, so in an hour and a half. I know I pasted the website for my office in the chat box earlier. If you can find that, you can go to that website, and right near the top on the left-hand side, you'll see something that says something about webinars. If you click that, it'll show you how to get into that webinar. The person running that today is a longtime SBA banker. He's very good at what he does. He's an employee of ours now. And he and one of the other staff will be doing that presentation, and they'll do a great job, and that should be able to help you out.
Great. All right, we're moving along to a question about the EIDL. It says, we accepted the loan offer, but the terms are a little scary. How long do we have to use the funds on approved uses? And would you dissuade anyone from accepting the EIDL loan?
Generally speaking, I would never tell somebody not to get it. If you need the money, then I think you should do it. If your business needs it, bottom line, my office wants you successful. We don't just want you to survive COVID. Survivor is fine. We want you to get through it, and we want you to grow after it. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have cash flow, if you don't have the funding to get through this strongly and come out of the back of this with some strength to your organization, then it may be difficult in the long term to do well. I think I would take the money now, because depending on your industry, 6 months from now, let's say, it may be 6 months before some restaurants, bars, entertainment venues, et cetera, are really going to be having the kind of customer flow they've had in the past. And if it takes that long, the demands on your business is probably going to make you look like a bad credit risk to a bank. So if at that time you may need some money in order to start taking advantage of the fact that customers are coming in, et cetera, in some respects, it may be too late. It may be very difficult for a bank to then finance you on expanding your business or repainting the outside or whatever it is you need done. So I would really, if you have the offer to get one, I would really encourage you to think of that seriously, and we can help you with that if need be. So the terms in the EIDL, the note on the EIDL is one size fits all. There is some verbiage in there that says you can't get other loans until you get approval from the SBA, and I'm paraphrasing. And if that's the part you're talking about, that gives a lot of people heartburn, but that's only if it's above, I believe, and I'm working from memory, $250,000. If yours is beneath that, then that section of the note does not apply to you. So if there's particular parts of that that really trouble you, then give my office a call and I'll plug that information in too. I guess I didn't do that earlier. Let me do it right now while we're talking about it. Here's our phone number and our email address. You can send that to us and we will get an answer to you. We'll do our best anyway. If we can't get an answer, we'll do our best to get you what you need. But most of those terms are not too bad. They might look scary, but they're required by SBA attorneys. Keep in mind that there's going to be about 6 million businesses getting EIDL loans. So, and every single one is going to get the same note you're getting. So if we can help you with that, please let us know.
We have had some people that have contacted us and as we're trying to work with them, they're saying, you know, I already had a disaster loan from Harvey, right? And of course, that's throughout our area that was hit pretty hard. So what are some options for them? I know that there's some deferment options and what would you encourage them to do if that's the case?
So if you have an existing SBA disaster loan, such as one from Harvey, well, first, that doesn't invalidate your ability to get one now. So that doesn't affect anything in that respect. Secondly, you automatically went on deferment, or you should have, until the end of this calendar year. So the SBA made the decision that every existing disaster loan would automatically go on deferment through December 30th. Now, interest is accumulating, but you should not be making payments at this point on your disaster loans. Those should have been deferred for you automatically. If they weren't, then the main reason that I know of would be because they were not in current status. Those loans were behind, or there was some other problem with the payment of those loans. So in that case, they may not have been deferred, but that should automatically have been deferred for you.
Okay, moving right along to the next question. We have full-time, part-time, and a few seasonal employees that only work during our peak times. Do we have to count the seasonal employees into the FTE count?
You do, and that's a good segue. Again, man, you're good, Jenna. Because I noticed another question about, you know, what tell me about those reference periods. So I'm going to put something in the chat box here, and it looks incomplete. Whoa, that wasn't it. Give me a quick second. I thought I had it. And this tells you the 3 reference periods. It looks a little weird, it looks incomplete. It's just going to say the borrower must first select a reference period, but at least you can see them. So those are 3 periods. What you're going to do is you're going to look back for your business and you're going to look either between February 15 and June 30 of 2019 or January 1st this year through February 29th. And you're going to calculate your FTEs in those periods. If you have seasonal employees, then you can choose one of those or any consecutive 12-week period that's between May 1 and September 15 of last year, because that's when a lot of seasonal work occurs. So that's your answer. You'll choose one of those 3. If it were my business, to be honest, you know, even though I'm a music major, I'm pretty good with Excel, and I would set up a spreadsheet and I would do my FTEs all 3 ways so that I could choose the one that's the most advantageous to me, because you want to choose whatever is easiest for you to achieve by June 30th. If you come up there with an FTE count of 10, then by June 30, by George, you want to have an FTE count of 10, because then you activate what's called the safe harbor. And that means there will be 0 reduction of forgiveness as a result of FTEs. That is super powerful. You want to take advantage of that if it makes sense for your business.
Great, and I'm going to encourage everybody, if you've got your questions, go ahead and type those in now in the chat function in our Zoom meeting. If you're joining us via Facebook Live, please type those questions into the comments and they will get fed to us through our staff that's monitoring our Facebook Live chat. Between the EIDL and the PPP, I know that when the PPP came out, a lot of people were applying for that, and as well as the EIDL. But talk to us about what the difference is and which one might make sense in certain scenarios.
Well, first and most importantly is that if you didn't apply for an EIDL in the past, you are no longer able to apply for one unless you're an agricultural business. So if you haven't applied for one, then it's just a moot point because your only choice in terms of these two programs would be PPP. As we mentioned earlier, there are billions of dollars left of PPP. So if you haven't pursued it yet, there's still lots of opportunity to do it. All those stories that you heard of somebody applied and the bank wouldn't call them back and they wouldn't answer their emails and they could never get any indication of what was going on. That is just over. That's behind us. Particularly the community banks here in Houston are super responsive at this point because they're completely caught up on PPP. Now, what's the difference though, fundamentally, is that PPP is really intended for paychecks. 75% or more has to be paychecks, and only 25% or less can be spent on non-paycheck, and it's very limited too. It's really only on rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. If you are, let's say, a manufacturing firm or a printing company, you've got to buy ink, you've got to buy paper, you've got to pay for labor, you got to pay for maintenance on machines, you've got to pay shipping costs to ship things to your customers. None of those, well, except for labor, are covered by the PPP. So the EIDL is tended to be 100% flexible in that it replaces the money you don't have now or the income you're not receiving now that you used to use to pay all of your normal operating expenses. What it won't cover, that's the easier thing to describe, is it won't cover new things. So this time last year, if you were buying paper, if you were buying ink, you're paying for maintenance, that's great. That covers that. You're paying the interest or paying your fixed debt payments, fine. But last year, you probably weren't buying vehicles or buying brand new machinery for your business or refurbishing your office or painting your building. Those aren't normal things. Those are unusual things. So those would not be included. So it's going to be those expenses in order to keep your business running and keep it open. So not the new things. There have been cases where folks will get a disaster loan and they decide, wow, this is great. This is low interest money. I'm going to go buy a new car. I'm going to go buy a bass boat or an RV. And unfortunately, that's it's not just a wrong use of funds. It's illegal when you do that. So when you get an EIDL loan, it tells you in the note exactly how to spend it. So don't get worried. I know you probably said, oh my God, it's going to be illegal. You'll throw me in jail. No, don't worry about that. Just spend it on your business to keep your business up and running. That's the point of EIDL.
Great. Okay, we've got another question. If a business decided not to renew the office lease, who does the business notify, and will personal property such as the home be considered collateral?
I'm not sure about that one. If you decide you weren't going to renew your lease, then you should be notifying your landlord that you're no longer going to be there. If you mean during the 8-week covered period after a PPP, if you are going to move from one office to the next, that's okay. I don't think we care. We just are going to need to see copies of both leases. And that's spelled out, by the way, in the PPP application itself. It does give you the details on the documents that are required that you would need to maintain. But then separately, you said, will personal property such as home be considered collateral? In Texas, you can't be done. In Texas, your personal home, your personal residence cannot be used as collateral for one of these loans that we're talking about. So you're okay there.
Okay, great. And while we're waiting for some other questions to be populated, what are some questions that you're hearing coming up because you're doing several of these Q&As with different organizations all across the greater Houston area. So what are some of those questions that are popping up that you think we should discuss today?
Yeah, well, these were all very good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a couple more things into your chat box. And then I can send all this to you, Jenna, in an email to make it more concise. But a very common question that people say, well, where do I get this application for forgiveness? And where do I get this guidance you keep talking about that explains all the details? Well, they're in your chat box right now. You can click those links. You can get the 11-page document right off of our website. And then you can get the detailed guidance. Now, let me tell you about the guidance. That guidance, I think, is 36 pages long. I work for the government, so I'm very good at reading things like that. I'll tell you, it's one of those first thing in the morning while you're drinking coffee kind of deals. It's probably going to be a little dry, but the content is terrific. The content's exactly what you need for your business to be able to take advantage of getting 100% forgiveness. Most of what you need, though, is in that forgiveness application itself. About 5 pages of that is the actual application. The other 6 pages are instructions and related details. So if there's anybody on here that can ever remember sitting down at your dining room table with one of those little newsprint things from the IRS where you do the little worksheets and all that by hand with a pencil before you do your 1040, it's like that. It's very similar to that kind of process. Another common question I get when people see this is they say, okay, where's the automated version of this thing? Because I don't want to do this by hand. I want something to guide me through the process. Well, there is nothing from the SBA. There may not be anything from the SBA. I understand that some banks are automating this. They're putting it on their website so that you may be able to go to their website, do all the same things that's required in this manual process, and do it in a more automated way. I'm aware of CPA firms that are publishing detailed spreadsheets that do this. I can't tell you about any of those because if I do, it seems like I'm endorsing it as a representative of the United States government. But I can tell you there's a very notable CPA firm here in Houston that has published a detailed spreadsheet on automating the calculations, et cetera, for PPP. I can't tell you that they've done it correctly. I haven't used it myself. I actually have it up and running right now on my computer, but I haven't used it. And for all I know, they got a formula wrong. And if they did, and you use their spreadsheet, then, well, it's wrong. So, but with all that said, here's my advice. If you're going to pursue a PPP, or if you have a PPP, and you're going to seek forgiveness, as you should be, divide it into 4 steps. First step, to get all your documentation organized and in front of you. And in that 11-page application, it tells you what that documentation is. You know, payroll registers, copies of your leases, copy of your mortgage loan amortization schedules, you know, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty straightforward stuff. You've got all this. It's only a matter of assembling it all and to be literal, you know, maybe one little pile. That's your first day. Just get that straight. And then declare that day a success and go enjoy yourself. Go back to work, what have you. Next day, you want to do the worksheet. The worksheet is probably going to be the most tedious part. There's nothing hard about it, but it may be tedious. If you've got 50 employees, then there's going to be 50 lines on the worksheet, one for every employee. Again, I don't think it's particularly difficult. It can just be tedious. So you're going to go through the second day and get all that down into the worksheet. When you're happy with it, declare it done. You had a success for today. Go about your life. Come back the next day. Then you're going to do Schedule A. I know this sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But it's easy. Schedule A, you're basically going to carry over the stuff from the worksheet, do a couple of new calculations, and you're done. It's really important there because you're going to start, you know, I showed you these reference periods earlier. Well, you got 3 ways of looking at your FTEs. As you go through this, you might decide one way is better than the other. So taking this a day at a time, I think really helps you think through what's the best for my business. And then finally, the last day, do the actual application itself. It's the easiest of all. You're carrying over information from the Schedule A, doing a couple more calculations. When you get to the end of the application, it gives you 3 numbers. The lowest of those is your forgiveness. Hopefully, they will all be equal to the amount of your loan. If they're not, by then you should know you should know why. You should know exactly why, because you've done all the calculations yourself. You've assembled all the information yourself. There's really nobody else to do this for you. You've got the records. You know your business. This is going to be easy. Just, I recommend breaking it across 4 days. You get to the end of the application. If it says you only get 90% forgiveness, by then you're going to know why. You're going to know exactly why. And that may give you an opportunity to go back, change the way you approached either the safe harbor or the Exclusions, we mentioned that earlier, the exceptions where you don't have to be accountable for people that didn't come back to work or that you fired or that quit, or maybe for the reference period for your FTEs. But you would know why you only got 90% forgiveness. And you may have an opportunity to go back, change the way you approached it, and get 100% forgiveness. So if we say you started on a Monday, then you're basically done by Thursday. If you didn't get exactly what you wanted, then yeah, take Friday and tweak it. Get it as good as it's going to be, and then you're done. And then it's simply a matter of submitting it to your bank. They get 60 days to look at it and decide if they agree with what you've done. They probably will, especially if you did a good job. And then they will tell the SBA, and we will make a payment on your behalf for the amount of the forgiveness.
I think that's great advice to break it up, because I think during the course of all this, the application and the rush and the stress that everyone's under, it's so easy to get overwhelmed and to make a mistake. And by breaking it up into this, I think that's just fantastic advice. So thank you for that. We did get some more questions that came in. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Tim?
No. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, did you say that the purchase of items like print, paper, toner, and office supplies are eligible towards PPP forgiveness?
They are not. They are
Okay.
not.
All right, great.
Yeah, what I was saying is that that is what you would use an EIDL for. A
Okay.
PPP couldn't be used for that, no.
Right, thank you for that clarification. Is the owner, do they count as the FTE?
Well, that's a great question. I see that's from Rowena. Rowena, that's a very good question. It is not clear, and I know that's not helpful to you, but it is not clear in the guidance whether you count the owner or not. I will say, in my personal opinion, this is not the SBA's opinion, that it's irrelevant. As long as you say you're not counting you, then leave yourself out of the reference period and leave yourself out of the 8-week covered period. And then you're comparing apples to apples. Make sure you use the same people or the same positions for each period, the reference period and the covered period. So include yourself or don't include yourself. It really would be irrelevant at that point. You know you're going to keep working there. It's your business. So if you include yourself, that's fine. If you don't include yourself, then again, I just don't think it has an impact. Just make sure that the positions you use in the covered period are the same positions you use for your reference period, so you're comparing apples and apples. I hope that makes sense, Rowena.
Great, and as our time is starting to run out, I would encourage any questions, go ahead and type those in if you've got one you want to ask. If you're joining us through Zoom, type them in the chat feature. If you're on Facebook Live, please go ahead and put those questions in the comment section, and we will get those fed to us so we can have your questions answered. I do want to take just a second to remind everyone, or to tell everyone in case you haven't seen it, we do have a webinar tomorrow at 11 a.m. And Mark Mitchell, everyone's favorite economic development professional, will be hosting that webinar, and they will be talking about the PPP forgiveness and talking about that application process for forgiveness. So we encourage you all to join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. You can go to our website, lakehouston.org, and register in the event section. And when you register, you'll get a confirmation that has the Zoom login ID so that you can log in via Zoom and have a chat with Mark Mitchell, our Lake Houston Economic Development President. And he'll be joined by Nicholas Stander with Stander CPAs, as well as Danny Sawyer with Plains State Bank. So we'll have a great panel discussion there on the forgiveness process if you have questions. Okay, and I've got another question that I've seen that has come through. Can you explain the impact of receiving EIDL loan or grant to PPP dollars?
Yeah, I sure can. So if you get both an EIDL grant and a PPP, and I'll give you an actual example. And by the way, you're one of my favorite economic development people too. So to give you an example, let's say you have a $100,000 PPP and you got a $5,000 EIDL grant. Here's what happens. Congress wanted everybody to get one grant, not two. So you go through your PPP, you apply for forgiveness, you get 100% forgiveness. So you had a $100,000 PPP, 100% forgiveness is $100,000. So SBA should be making a payment against your account for $100,000. In this case, we won't. It'll be 100,000 minus 5,000. So the EIDL grant will be deducted from forgiveness at that point, so that there's not the equivalent of 2 EIDL grants being given. So that means that equates to a forgiveness now of 95,000. So the remaining 5,000, either you just pay that off or it turns into a 2-year loan, excuse me, at 1%. And Jenna, what I wanted to mention earlier, and it went right in and out of my head. Another common question is, when do I have to apply for forgiveness? How soon after my 8-week period? And at the moment, there is no requirement for when you do it. If it were me, my business, I would want to do it as quickly as I could. I mean, I'm not going to break a neck to get it done. Like I said, I would take at least a week to work through the application. But the quicker that you get it in, the quicker you get an answer about your forgiveness, and then the sooner the thing can be paid off and you can just stop worrying about it. So I think there's an advantage in getting it done.
Great. And we've got another question that's come in. What is the reference period and the current period? What's the difference between those two?
Yeah, so there's 2 phrases, and I may have used them incorrectly. I may have gotten loose, Imelda. So it's what's called the reference period and the covered period. The reference period, and I posted some dates into the chat box earlier, there are 3 choices for a reference period. So what you're going to do is you're going to look back at one of these 3 reference periods and calculate your full-time equivalent employees. Then for the covered period, the intention is that you're going to be replacing, if you laid them off, you're going to be replacing them or bringing them back and getting back to that full-time equivalent headcount. And as long as you get back to that FTE by June 30th, then you will have no reduction in forgiveness as a result of FTE. So we call that the safe harbor. So that's what those 2 are. So if you may have to scroll back through the chat box, but those reference periods are in there, and I can paste them in again if we need to.
Great. And we will also have this recording of this webinar that we will make available so that people can go back and say, what did he say again? And go and listen, but also see the notes that you've written. So if you feel like you've missed something or want to hear it again, we will have this recording available so that you can do so. Okay, any other questions that you think we have not covered that are important that you've been hearing as you've been doing your Q&A tour around the Houston area?
Yeah, I'll throw one more out. No, I think everybody here has had all the same basic questions, and they're all very good questions. And thank you. You're all keeping me on my toes. I told you about our forgiveness webinars that we do. They're pretty straightforward. They're just a cruise through the application and then an explanation of some of the guidance. But the Texas Gulf Coast Small Business Development Center also is doing, and I think they're every day, forgiveness webinars, and they go into some details we don't. They do actual hypothetical examples, they do calculations, and they get a lot more into the weeds of doing an actual forgiveness application. So you may want to check that out. I'm going to paste that in the chat box right now. And what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to paste all 3 of the SBA, what we call resource partners. So these are organizations that we help fund, and they are all available to you, about 250 different people. They're available to you completely free. They are counselors to small business. They can help you with anything your business needs. It doesn't have to be just PPP or EIDL. It can be any need that your business has got. So there you see the Texas Gulf Coast SBDC. They're the ones doing the forgiveness webinar I told you about. There's Houston SCORE that we talked about earlier. And then also, we should never forget the WBEA Women's Business Center. So they all have an active role to play in the small business ecosystem here in Houston. And again, it's about 250 or so folks right here in the Houston area ready to help you. That's great.
That's great. There's a lot of resources out there. So use them, right? And if you contact us and need help, we always are great at making sure that we pair you with the right resource and find that expert. And sometimes, and Tim's gotten an email from me saying, I'm not sure if you're the right person to help us with this, but can you point us in the right direction? And you guys are always great with making sure the businesses get the answers.
Good.
So
We try.
appreciate
Thank you.
that. It looks like one last question that's come in here. If our loan finishes on June 15th and we decide to furlough before June 30th, is this okay because it's after the loan coverage period?
Yeah, I think it would be. You achieved your FTE before June 30th, and that's the cutoff for the safe harbor. So you should be fine. So if it finishes on June 15 and you're able to show that you met your FTE comparing the reference period to the covered period during that your loan period, then you should have no reduction in forgiveness based on FTE. I would encourage you to get that application into your banker quickly. But after that period, if you decide you need to furlough or lay off or what have you, well, we know that that's just a business decision that you have to make for your business. So that would not have any effect because it's after your covered period.
Okay. Great. I think we're going to wrap things up here.
Okay.
We certainly appreciate you spending this hour with us today. I know for many businesses, it's invaluable to get that chance to ask that one question that they're just not sure of, that's keeping them up at night, that they're wondering. And you've always been such a great friend to businesses and to our organization. So thank you for spending the time here with us today. Any parting words that you have, or have you pretty much covered it?
No, there is one last thing I would like to say to everybody here, and I think it's really important. COVID is a horrible economic disaster. Never mind the medical side, it's a horrible economic disaster, and it's hurting a lot of our businesses. But COVID is also an opportunity, and you're probably thinking I'm nuts, but it is. I personally know several businesses that have taken this time, they've adapted their business models, and they are doing things now they've never done that are generating significant new revenue for them that they've never experienced before. And some of this is very high profit margin revenue. I was on a different one of these the other day, Jenna, and the organization I was doing it with says, many of our members are restaurants. And the problem is a restaurant can't make any profit if they only can open at 25% capacity. Well, as an MBA, to me, there's an easy answer. Look at your core competencies. What is it you are good at? In their case, they're good at preparing a lovely, delicious meal that you like to enjoy. And maybe part of what they deliver to you that they're good at is the atmosphere. But fundamentally, they're good at meals. You don't have to only deliver those meals in the confines of your dining room. Those meals can be delivered in all different ways. You may start doing catering if you haven't done it before. You might enter into contracts with some of the larger employers in Houston to bring food to their location so their employees don't have to leave at lunchtime and potentially expose themselves to a virus. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do with that core competence that your business has. So I would encourage you, look at what it is. What are you good at? What is that fundamental thing that you are good at? And then decide how you can deliver that without staying in your existing business model. So if you have a store and your success depends on getting a lot of clients in your store, well, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. So how do you sell your goods without having a full store? How do you achieve at least your break-even level without having a full store? Do you start selling your products on eBay? Do you start selling on Amazon? Do you do pop-up boutiques? What do you do? So that's what I would encourage everybody to do. We don't only want to see you survive COVID, we want to see you prosper. We want to see your businesses growing and robust. And it's going to take a lot more than going back to what we've always done in order to achieve that for many businesses. So that is my fond hope for everybody on here. If you need help brainstorming that, if you're just not sure how you might reinvent yourself to adapt to what we're all facing now, then I would encourage you to contact those resource partners of the SBA. There, you're going to be able to get people that will get on a one-on-one Zoom call with you, talk to you about your business, understand your challenges, maybe help you think through some of those ideas. If you need financing for those, can help you find that financing. If you need attorneys to help you with something, help you find those. Whatever it takes, that's what we want to do. So that is what I want everybody to depart with. Don't just survive this thing. Identify how to prosper.
That's great advice. And that's something a lot of people, when they think of the SBA, you're a loan generator, right? But you do so much more than that.
Yes, we do.
Through your business counseling and helping businesses craft those plans and making sure that they've got everything in place that they need. You've got some really great leaders and advisors there at the SBA that are there to help businesses every step of the way, whether it's from startup to expansion, to disasters. You guys are there, you've got the experience, the knowledge, the expertise, and you definitely have the passion to be helping the businesses through whatever their needs are. So we encourage you to use our partners at the SBA. They're terrific, and we want our businesses to succeed as well. So thank you so much for that advice. That was some great parting words.
Well, you are very welcome.
Thank you everyone that's joined us today. For our Q&A. Like I said, this will be up so you can watch it again if you need to rewind and get some clarification on something you thought you heard was said. You can always contact Tim's team at SBA. You can contact us and we can pair you with them as well. And we're all here to help. We'd like to say thank you again to our presenting sponsor, Minuteman Press of Humble. Thank you, Connie, for joining us today and giving us some words. We're excited that you're about to reopen as well. And our gold sponsor, The Groves, Ashlar Development. Do want to remind you to tune in tomorrow at the same time, 11 a.m. We'll have our Economic Development President, Mark Mitchell, who's going to be hosting our PPP loan forgiveness webinar. We also have our Atascocita BizCom Zoom meeting. And that's coming up next Thursday, June 11th. You can register for both of these events at lakehouston.org in our event section. When you register, we will send you the confirmation. In that confirmation will be the link to the Zoom meeting. We suggest that you do this. This is the best way to participate. All these events will also be on Facebook Live. But to be able to ask those questions and get in, the Zoom we think is the best way. And we want you to register and get those Zoom credentials so you can join us that way. So we've got some great speakers lined up for our Atascocita BizCom, including Commissioner Precinct 2, Adrian Garcia, as well as our Lake Houston YMCA Executive Director, Chris Bush, our Superintendent, Dr. Fagan, and many others that's joining us. So hear the latest and get the updates from them. Also, we just announced we do have our State of the County virtual lunch-in, and that will be held on Tuesday, June the 23rd, and that'll be at 12 p.m. We're really excited to be able to host County 4 Commissioner Jack Cagle as our guest speaker, and he may be bringing along some other surprise guests to answer your questions and to have a good discussion with you there. Finally, and importantly, we want to thank Sam Schrade with Digital Network Associates and his team. They are always able to provide us such a great virtual webinar experience with all of our events. And we thank you so much for your service to our community and to our organization. To our businesses out there, thanks again for joining us. Whatever your needs are, contact the Chamber. We are here to help you not only survive, but to thrive through the pandemic and meet all the needs that you have afterwards. So thank you for joining us and have a great day.